All right, welcome back. Doug Gottlieb is joining us. What a crazy NBA playoff. So I was saying this, Doug. You've moved around a lot professionally. You've done this stuff. I said the upside to professional mobility is a lot of times you don't have to go through the struggle of a new company. You join a good company that's formed. Commerce is good. And you kind of ride the wave, and you jump on the wave, and you got. Whereas the downside to professional mobility is sometimes you feel like an outsider. And Kevin Durant was talking this weekend. He's like, I hear it. I hear what everybody's saying. Like, they were good without you. And it's funny because I really like Kevin Durant, and you and I have both moved around, and I think the Warriors have done an amazing job to make him feel like, dude, this is your place. But it's not. Right? Like, it's not, and he does feel like an outsider, and I get it.
He does. It is really weird, though, how the narratives kind of change, right? Like, first, if you take the Warriors, remember their first championship, if we're just honest, Kyrie only played in game one and didn't play all the way in overtime because he hurt his knee, and they didn't have Kevin Love, right? So everybody said, and if you go back through the Cavs didn't, I'm saying, and if you go back through their playoff run, every team they played was missing their point guard. For at least, even the Grizzlies were missing Mike Conley for a couple games. Drew Holiday didn't play a couple games.
They got some breaks.
They got several breaks, and then they almost lost to the Thunder. They did lose to the Cavs.
Yes,
and they add Kevin Durant. People are like, well, they were already a championship team. Like, no, they actually weren't. They had won a championship. This took them to another level. And even in this season. The last month of the season, Kevin Durant was trying to be a great teammate, moving the basketball. Look at the number of shots, field goal attempts, and the average points. Like, the reason he wasn't first team All-NBA was he was trying to truly buy in to how they want to play. And then after 2 games against Clippers, people were like, well, why aren't you scoring that much? So he's like, oh, you want me to score? Okay, here's 45 a night.
Yeah, right.
And now they have 3 comebacks without him, and it's like, wow, they don't really need you. So I understand what it must feel like to be Kevin Durant, or I don't actually understand, but I understand where he's coming from. He wins 2 finals MVPs, stare down LeBron James, the better player in the second half of 4 of the 5 games, makes the dagger 3 in game 3 in Cleveland, both games. And it wasn't until this season, right before he hurts his calf, where everybody's like, you know what? He actually might be the best player. And now, he feels a little bit like an outsider. This reminds me of in high school sports when the kid transfers in. Yeah. Right? You already had all these guys grew up playing together. Right. And they were good. They won like a section championship and maybe a state championship. But you add him and like, well, he's not really from the area. Like, I did. I moved in. I did what I was supposed to do. That said, I think they need him to win this series.
No, I think, I said it reminds me a little bit of the Mavericks series where you had a good coach, 1 star, bunch of cagey veterans. You'd won the 2 regular season matchups against the Heat. They've won the 2 regular season. You got length. And by the way, there's no indecision for those Mavs or these Raptors. Who's taking the shot? Yeah. We're not arguing about it. I think it's actually a fairly competitive series.
Oh, I think it's a very good series. Look, the Raptors were not a bad team. They just could not. The MVP of the finals was not Kawhi Leonard. It was LeBron James of the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Because they couldn't mentally, emotionally get over LeBron James. Right. Whether it was last year or a couple years ago when they went 6 games, like they just could not get over. It was always like, they were the Cleveland Cavaliers or the New York Knicks of the 80s and 90s.
Couldn't get past Jordan.
Could not get past Jordan. They could not get. So LeBron opens it up, and then they get Kawhi. And let's not underestimate some of the other moves. Getting Marc Gasol late. That's a huge pickup. So they're a good team with a great player who they have a couple guys with championship experience. He's been a finals MVP. No, I think this is an awesome series. On the other hand, I think Steph's playing the best basketball of his life. Yeah. I think Klay has regained his form. I think the time off was huge for Andre Iguodala, who might be the most important player. I think Draymond Green looks like the Draymond Green of a couple years ago in terms of being in shape and actually making shots. He didn't make shots in the playoffs at all last year. People said it was his shoulder, then it was his knee. So I think they're going to get the best version of the old group of Warriors, but I do think you need somebody to stare down Kawhi Leonard, and that guy's number 35.
Mid-season of the NBA, there was a poll that said, who would you build your franchise around? And it was 3 centers. And I'm like, man, I never trust centers late at the line. I think you can marginalize them with a new spacing of the NBA. You can marginalize them. And I want guys who control the tempo. I want you to have the ball in your hands. I mean, it's a possession league, not a rebounding league, right? And it's nothing against Giannis. I give him the MVP. But, I mean, let's be honest. Kawhi gave Giannis fits.
Yes.
Like
Kawhi's look. Let's start with the Kawhi conversation. I know you want to get to the Bucks.
Yeah.
But I sat here, and I've sat here for a couple years saying, like, okay, people said LeBron was the best. I thought KD was the best. Now people are saying the third best player in the NBA has been Kawhi Leonard, and now you can make the argument he's the second best or the best player in the NBA. Yeah. He's because of what he does at both ends of the floor. And I understand what you're saying about his passing. He's not a natural passer, although he had a couple games in the series.
He had a couple good ones here.
Yeah, because they were collapsing and making him pass. And hey, when Fred VanVleet shoots 87% in his last 3 games, there's going to be some assists there. But what he's able to do at the other end of the floor, the best players in the league have to be able to play both ends. That's why James Harden cannot be on this list of best players in the league. That's frankly what limits Steph Curry, as great as he is on offense. And they have to be able to guard all 5 positions. And Kevin Durant can do it, and Kawhi Leonard can do it, and Giannis can do it. The problem with Giannis is he's just not there yet as a shooter. And the interesting thing about Giannis heading forward is the free throw line. You know, does this become like a Nick Anderson moment? Remember, Nick Anderson missed 4 free throws.
Covered him.
Game 1.
Yep.
Magic against the Rockets, and he never recovered. Can Giannis recover at the free throw line? His perimeter jump shot will get better. He went from a guy that couldn't shoot at all to a guy that can make some shots now. He'll get better over time. The question becomes the free throw line because that's more of a mental thing, as well as the physics of it. His shot is a little broke.
You know, I was saying that with parity, I went back this weekend. And there's not as much parity as you think in sports. People forget this. When I was a kid growing up, and I wasn't ever a huge hockey fan, but I can remember the Montreal Canadiens in the 60s and 70s owned the league. Now, Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito for about an hour came in, and it wasn't until the New York Islanders had Mike Bossy and great players. The Canadiens owned the NHL. I mean, they just.
How long ago was this?
This was in the 60s and early 70s.
Okay, I remember the Islanders and then the Oilers.
But we talk about parity.
And then I never paid attention to hockey ever again.
The Minneapolis Lakers own the 50s.
Kings in 93.
The Celtics own the 60s. The Montreal Canadiens own the 60s.
Yes.
Our life has been dynasties.
Yes.
And like right now we're like, Kevin Durant. Milwaukee, Portland, and Toronto were 3 of the Final 4 teams. That feels like as much parity as the NBA's had in years.
Yes, and the Celtics could have been there, and the Sixers are 1 shot away from being there, right? I mean, like Portland, maybe not, but you would think the Lakers will be competitive next year. There's a chance that the Clippers get some of the, But it goes back to your point. I kind of think if the Warriors stay together, or if they lose KD, they can add a piece, right? They're not going to just go as is. They got to add somebody to fill that small forward void, and eventually Andre Iguodala is going to be too old. Eventually Sean Livingston's body just lets down. Like they got to find another piece. But yes, I think the NBA is really, really healthy. I think it's probably healthier in terms of parity-wise than maybe the National Football League, where you have the Patriots and then somebody trying to beat the Patriots every year.
Yeah, and I like where we're at. So here we go. We talk about all these free agent moves. And I asked Chris Broussard earlier, which one are you absolutely sure about? And he's like, well, KD to the Knicks. And I'm like, I think he's going to Brooklyn with Kyrie. I really do.
I thought you said he was already calling last week.
No.
My phone buzzes and it says, Colin Cowherd says he's a very good source at the Knicks.
I have a current NBA player that has told me he's the Knicks, and I had a former MVP who has told me he's the Knicks. But I think Kevin Durant is easy to persuade and listens to compelling arguments. If I told you, Doug, 2 moves that happen. I don't know any. I think Jimmy Butler to the Lakers, I think he's their number 1. And as long as they get he's their number 1, I think it happens. I think they'll max him.
I think Kawhi to the Clippers
it
feels like the most likely. Feels like the most likely. But, you win a championship and the city throws itself around you, and it'd be really, really hard to pack up your stuff and go, hey, deuces, I'm out. But it feels like he's a mercenary. And by the way, if you're Toronto, even if they lose him, I would have made that move, 6 days a week, twice on Sunday anyway. Right. It gets you to a place you've never been before. I think there's all kinds of interesting things there. First, the Brooklyn part of it is fascinating. Fascinating. I don't know how many people know, like Brooklyn's actually more expensive to live in than the island of Manhattan.
Right.
It's an unbelievable area. And if you look at how Kyrie and KD, how they talk, how they think, how, other things matter to them outside of basketball, although basketball matters a lot to them, they fit the mentality of that Brooklyn bubble. But it's still the Nets. right? It's still the Nets. It's not the Knicks. On the other hand, if you go to the Knicks, you got to play for a team owned by James Dolan. Whether he's involved or not, can you be at the cool guy table and like, hey, you're collecting checks from James Dolan? That's a hard thing for some of those guys to take. Then you talk about L.A. Like, I love everything about the Clippers, and you've had their org chart. Yeah. Like, that's amazing. And Lawrence Frank does a good job. Trent Renton does an amazing job. Like this, you go through organizational structure. They got studs across the board and a tremendous coach who everybody respects has won a championship. And then you get the Lakers that are a mess, but they got $40 million cap space. They got LeBron James. They got good young players. They got a number 4 pick in the draft, and they're the Lakers. Like, I still struggle to not be convinced that Kyrie doesn't not have a home, and he's like, it was rough dealing with LeBron in the past, but at least I know what I have. And a bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. And I'm going to, like, Kyrie to the Lakers makes a lot more sense, whereas at mid-year, I would have said no way. Now I kind of think maybe they're the ones, because Brooklyn has such a good culture. I don't think Kyrie fits in with that culture. He's just not. I mean, maybe D'Angelo Russell fit in there, or maybe they think they can make Kyrie into what D'Angelo Russell became because he's a better player. But I just don't think he fits in their culture. I don't think they want to take. I have no idea what's going to happen because there's so many reasons to not go to those 3 destinations, and then the Lakers are such a mess.
Yeah, it's funny about this. I always say I've done the yellow notepad, so I've left like 4 times cross country. And it really is simple. You get a week out, 2 weeks out, and you get a yellow notepad, pros and cons.
I've done that. I mean, you end up in the same place.
Well,
like,
not for me. Like, generally, I think I've made the right decision every time. And I think the audience thinks it's about the shoe deal. And it's about this. It's amazing. You think it's complicated. But when you move cross-country to new teams, like LeBron just decided, there's a basketball school for my kid. Maverick Carter lives out there. I can do business. And I still contend it came down to kind of basic tenets, family, business, hoops. And he made the deal. I didn't think it was that I think
transition is hard, man. I mean, like leaving LeBron this year, like this transition has been hard. And because anybody who's ever been recruited, you get recruited and then you show up and then, I mean, like look at Kyrie. Like, Kyrie, everything was going great, and then his knee was bothering him, and he has a procedure, and then they turn out he has to have another procedure, and now all of a sudden the thing just flipped on him overnight. And he went from, I'm staying if you'll have me, to, no, he doesn't necessarily want them, and they don't necessarily want him. Kevin Durant knew what he was getting into. He's accomplished everything he's set out to do. Like, the only reason he came here was to stare down LeBron James and win championships. And he did it, and he was the finals MVP. And he's still not happy, right? So the idea, I understand the parallel between your life and leaving and coming here.
Yeah.
It's a massive change to think about the change you had. You had 2 families, right? Okay, so you had these guys have a lot more to think about, and then they look at the past and how many other guys have gone different places and haven't been happy. Or then you're Russell Westbrook and you stay and you're not happy.
How about this? LeBron created a real momentum with player mobility. How about this theory? His disastrous Lakers season, would you be shocked, Doug? Kawhi stays in Toronto, Durant stays in the Bay Area, Clay re-signs with the Warriors, Butler stays with the Sixers. And they all look at LeBron and go, ain't that easy. They took the cape off Superman. Let's just stay put and make the most money.
I would be shocked. I don't think it's likely. But, again, you've told me before, and I've moved several times cross country. Don't mess with happy. You do wish the guys would understand what they have. And, like a Kevin Durant, like, all right, so it's Steph's team. Like, okay, I still get a bunch of money. I get to win championships. I can, I'll play in San Francisco next year. Like, we can do whatever we want to do.
New arena, cool city.
But not enough people. I do think that it's not just LeBron. It's the culture of the sport. From switching jerseys and switching AAU teams to switching colleges. None of these guys obviously did, but it's kind of the culture of the sport. The culture of this sport is to go to the hottest team, to play with your buddies, to try something new, and then when you get there, the first person to go is the coach. That's what happens with all the AAU teams. That's what happens with all the college teams. That's what happens with the pro teams.
Doug Gottlieb, good seeing you, Duggar.
Great to see you.
A joy with the news.
No.